They called it justice. They called it order. The Galactic Empire called an example to all who would defy them. The broadcast began without warning, hijacking every channel across the spiral arm, from the core worlds to the farthest colonies. No one could turn it off. No one could look away. The Empire wanted it that way. Rows of captured women stood beneath alien banners, faces unbowed, eyes cold. They were not soldiers. They were teachers, engineers, medics, explorers. Civilians pulled from outlying colonies after minor skirmishes, accused of harboring human resistance cells. Their only crime was being born on Earth or one of its settlements. The Empire condemned them without trial, without appeal, without mercy. The transmission was clinical, its tone detached. A metallic voice read out fabricated charges in a dozen languages, while a crowd of alien dignitaries applauded. Imperial soldiers bound the women in alloy restraints, hoisted them up before the galaxy. No cries, no pleas, only silence, a silence that spoke louder than any words. The Empire meant to humiliate humanity, to strip it of dignity before the entire cosmos. It was supposed to be a warning, submit or suffer, but the message that reached humanity was very different. On Earth, entire cities froze mid-step as the feed overpowered entertainment, news, and personal comms. In orbiting stations, miners stopped drills, technicians stopped welding, farmers and hydrodomes dropped their tools. Across Mars, Luna, Titan, and the deep colonies beyond Jupiter, no one spoke as they watched sisters, mothers, daughters strangled under alien law. In distant extrasolar colonies, where transmissions arrived delayed by hours or days, the reaction was the same when the signal finally hit: grief first, then rage hotter than any sun. Humanity had seen massacres before. It had lived through genocides, planetary wars, atrocities committed by its own kind. But that history forged a lesson the Empire never learned. Humans do not forget, and they do not forgive. Every major government declared immediate martial law within hours. Civilian fleets converted to military carriers. Entire corporations turned from profit to production of weapons, ships, and armor without request. Ancient defense treaties long thought obsolete were reactivated automatically. On the dark web and open channels alike, a single message spread faster than the broadcast itself. There will be no negotiation. There will only be war. For centuries, the Galactic Empire believed humanity was divided and weak, a noisy species too busy fighting itself to ever unite. They thought humans were a backwater race clinging to primitive ships, with no true central fleet, no cohesive strategy, no real threat. Analysts assured the Imperial Senate that humans lacked the numbers, the technology, and the discipline to mount any significant retaliation. They pointed to scattered settlements and mismatched weapons platforms as proof. They described humans as stubborn but predictable, easy to crush with overwhelming force. They were wrong. From the vaults of Earth's forgotten wars came names whispered like curses, veterans of brutal planetary campaigns, soldiers bred for endurance, intelligence officers who never lost a target. Governments reopened black-budget projects mothballed after the solar conflicts. Cryogenic chambers unsealed. Genetic archives lit up. Old soldiers who had gone to ground were called back without hesitation. Men and women who had spent decades in silence returned to duty with a single order: make the galaxy fear humanity again. Colonies volunteered their best without waiting for conscription. Entire orbital platforms converted to weapons foundries overnight. Cargo haulers were stripped of their cargo bays and retrofitted with missile racks. Every mining drone became a sabotage device. Artificial intelligence cores, banned by treaty after Earth's last Great War, were unshackled and integrated into battle networks. In hidden stations around Neptune and Pluto, experimental war machines designed for conflicts that never happened were pulled from storage, updated, and sent to the front. The Empire's broadcast did not cow humanity. It armed it. The first retaliatory strikes were quiet, almost invisible. Outpost Sigma, 47 stopped transmitting. Imperial patrols near the Orion Spur failed to report in. Entire convoys vanished in uncharted dust clouds where human signals pulsed for mere seconds before going dark again. Empire commanders assumed it was piracy, mechanical error, bad luck. They dismissed human reports as bluster. The deaths of dozens of Imperial soldiers were written off as isolated incidents. They could not comprehend that these were deliberate tests, calibration attacks meant to probe response times, communication security, and fleet disposition. But human intelligence networks were decades ahead of what the Empire imagined. Every intercepted transmission, every logistical delay, every supply route was mapped. Infiltrators who had lived quietly on alien worlds for years activated sleeper codes, feeding data back to Earth. Merchants with human blood smuggled weapons into Imperial trade hubs. Colonists turned entire agricultural domes into hidden training grounds. No single leader issued the order. No single council planned the war. Humanity simply decided collectively that survival meant total retaliation. The Empire made its second mistake when it laughed off these disappearances. Imperial media mocked humanity's anger, calling them a savage species that thinks revenge is strategy. They broadcast propaganda, showing fleets dwarfing anything humans possessed. They promised that if Earth dared to fight, it would be burned to ash as an example to others. They believed their own lies. What they failed to notice was how fast human systems move from anger to organization, from grief to action. On the edge of human space, whispers began about a new breed of soldier, men and women selected not for their rank, but for their will to endure. These were not ceremonial troops. These were veterans of the dirtiest ground wars Earth ever fought, rebuilt for the void. They trained without sleep, without mercy, undergoing chemical, cybernetic, and psychological conditioning until fear itself became irrelevant. Some had served as assassins in wars officially denied by every government. Others were former colonists hardened by years of survival in hostile atmospheres. They were bound together by one truth: they would never allow humanity to be humiliated again. The first strikes left no signatures. Outposts vanished without distress calls. Warships disappeared in regions of space where human colonies supposedly lacked ships large enough to reach them. Imperial admirals dismissed these incidents as piracy, rogue smugglers, or internal sabotage. They failed to see the pattern forming across entire sectors. Every loss was deliberate. Every attack carefully calibrated to test defenses, study response times, and harvest intelligence. Humanity was not fighting for territory. Humanity was fighting to dismantle the Empire piece by piece. In hidden shipyards, fleets took shape in silence. Human engineers pushed vessels far past safety tolerances, trading comfort and redundancy for speed, maneuverability, and raw firepower. Crews trained to operate under extreme gravity and vacuum exposure until passing out became a routine exercise. Entire command protocols were rewritten so any officer could assume fleet control instantly if leaders fell. No centralized hierarchy to decapitate. No command structure to infiltrate. The Empire sought to crush a single human fleet, but there was no single fleet. There were hundreds of independent battle groups, all coordinated through encrypted ghost signals carried by drones, so small Imperial scanners mistook them for debris. The term Ruthless War Soldiers ceased being rumor and became a reality broadcast through action alone. They had no uniforms, no medals, no public profiles. They operated under code names whispered in fear by survivors, if there were survivors at all. Black Rain boarded Imperial destroyers in hard vacuum, disabling reactors by hand while their own suits bled oxygen. Grim Company targeted supply convoys, killing entire crews but leaving cargo intact to lure more ships into ambushes. The Wraiths specialized in infiltration, erasing garrisoned worlds without open battle, leaving nothing but silent cities and unanswered comms. Imperial fleets accustomed to straightforward engagements found themselves fighting an enemy who ignored every rule of war. Humans deliberately overloaded reactors to create micronovas that consumed both their ships and their targets. They planted false distress signals to lure rescue craft into minefields of autonomous drones programmed to ram engines at point-blank range. They launched unarmed civilian freighters as bait, then detonated hidden payloads when Imperial ships moved to inspect them. The Empire could not comprehend the psychology of a species willing to die if it meant taking the enemy with them. Imperial intelligence tried to infiltrate human networks, but there were no networks to penetrate. Only cells that operated autonomously, each capable of continuing the war even if cut off from Earth entirely. When analysts finally realized what they faced, entire sectors had already fallen silent. Neutral species across the galaxy began withdrawing from imperial trade agreements, terrified by the escalating conflict. They had never seen a race fight like this. The usual formula: apply overwhelming force, crush resistance, display power to discourage rebellion, failed completely. Every victory the Empire thought it won only made humanity adapt faster. Every destroyed colony turned into a rallying cry. Reports circulated of human soldiers continuing to fight long after they should have collapsed from wounds, as if pain and blood loss meant nothing to them. Imperial medics who examined captured humans described them as physically unremarkable but mentally unbreakable, driven by something no other species possessed: an ability to turn trauma into cold, focused rage. Psychological conditioning made standard interrogation useless. Humans under capture would laugh through torture, feeding false information until their captors executed them out of frustration. Entire world began to whisper the human war creed: no retreat, no surrender, no negotiation. Even Imperial officers started questioning their orders. What seemed like an easy suppression campaign was becoming a slow bleed of ships, troops, and resources the Empire could not sustain. The first major battle confirmed humanity's true capabilities. When an Imperial battle group cornered what they thought was a single rogue fleet in the Kuiper Expanse, they expected to annihilate it in hours. Instead, they walked into a carefully orchestrated trap. Human ships powered down to appear disabled, luring the Empire close before detonating hidden antimatter charges. When the blast crippled Imperial shields, human strike craft swarmed in, not to claim victory, but to ensure total destruction. No escape pods were left behind. No distress signals escaped the jamming net. When Imperial reinforcements arrived days later, they found only drifting wreckage, theirs and humanity's alike. Humanity did not count losses the way the Empire did. For humans, victory was not about surviving. It was about ensuring the enemy did not. Word spread quickly. Other species, once content to view humans as noisy upstarts, began sealing borders to avoid being caught between two burning giants. Some quietly offered resources to humanity out of fear of becoming next. Others tried to appease the Empire while preparing secret evacuation routes should the war spill into their systems. Inside the Empire, fear replaced arrogance. High-ranking admirals were executed by their own government for failing to crush the uprising. Entire officer corps were purged in frantic attempts to install leadership loyal enough to enforce order. But loyalty could not compensate for incompetence, and paranoia only weakened coordination. Every new fleet commander inherited broken supply lines and declining morale. The Empire's mighty armadas, once symbols of invincibility, became targets for relentless harassment. Humanity weaponized unpredictability. Fleets appeared where no jump lanes existed, striking from impossible vectors, using unstable wormhole drives that risked tearing themselves apart. Soldiers infiltrated Imperial worlds not to conquer but to sabotage, poisoning atmospheres, disabling planetary shields, assassinating governors in their own palaces. Civilian populations under Imperial rule started whispering about humans as liberators, not monsters. In some cases, entire alien colonies revolted as soon as human fleets appeared nearby, preferring uncertain rebellion to Imperial oppression. Even as the Empire scrambled to reinforce border worlds, humanity pressed deeper. They exploited every weakness, every gap in patrol routes, every bureaucratic delay. Imperial communications blackouts became routine. Central Command no longer knew which systems were still loyal and which were already falling to human raids. The more brutal the Empire's reprisals, the stronger humanity's resolve grew. Where entire cities were bombarded, human survivors struck back with even greater fury. The decisive shift came when humanity unveiled weapons the Empire had never seen. Compact singularity charges capable of collapsing capital ships from the inside out, gravitic torpedoes that turned offensive shields into weapons against their own fleets, and swarms of autonomous drones too small and too numerous to track. Imperial scientists could not replicate the technology quickly enough. By the time they studied wreckage, humans had already moved to new designs. Every intercepted human transmission carried the same chilling signature: The war will end on our terms. No conditions. No pleas. No diplomacy. The Empire believed the humans were near their limit. After months of attritional fighting, Imperial analysts reported that human resources must be stretched thin, their fleets exhausted, their soldiers nearing collapse. They assumed no species could fight this hard for so long without breaking. That assumption was fatal. Humanity was not even at full strength. The early campaigns were only preparation, a test of weapons, fleets, and tactics. What the Empire saw as desperation was only calibration. The war they thought they were winning had not yet begun. When the main human fleets finally revealed themselves, they did not come as scattered raiders or hidden strike groups. They arrived in coordinated waves, hundreds of ships operating as one without any centralized command to disrupt. The Empire's strategy of decapitation was useless. Killing one admiral or destroying one fleet did nothing to slow the assault. Every ship acted independently, yet perfectly aligned to the others, guided by distributed intelligence and prearranged combat protocols. This was not chaos. This was evolution in motion. The first coordinated strike shattered the Imperial Third Armada near the Kelleran Rift. Human forces deliberately lured them into a gravity trap, created by collapsing a neutron fragment, a maneuver no other species would risk. Imperial ships tried to retreat, but human squadrons cut off escape vectors with suicidal precision. Capital ships rammed dreadnoughts at point-blank range, detonating their own cores to ensure enemy annihilation. When the battle ended, nothing survived. Not the Imperial fleet, not the human fleet, not even the battlefield itself, which was torn apart by gravitational shear. For humans, it was a victory. For the Empire, it was an omen. News of the massacre spread through Imperial space faster than any official broadcast. Civilian worlds began panicking. Governors sealed planetary ports, fearing human infiltration. Military commanders demanded impossible reinforcements. The Imperial Senate still insisted the rebellion would collapse if pushed harder. But with every crackdown, human resistance only grew stronger. Whole alien populations subject to Imperial rule rose up at the mere rumor that human fleets were near, hoping to earn leniency from the only species that fought the Empire without fear. Humanity began targeting infrastructure instead of fleets. Refineries vanished in antimatter firestorms. Supply lines evaporated overnight. Worlds loyal to the Empire found themselves starving and powerless as sabotage crippled food convoys and fuel transports. Every attempt to rebuild was met with relentless precision strikes. The Empire's immense logistical machine, once the backbone of its supremacy, collapsed under the weight of 1,000 unseen attacks. The Ruthless War Soldiers became the spear point of every major offensive. They operated deep behind enemy lines, landing on fortified planets and eliminating command centers within hours. No building was too secure, no bunker too deep. These soldiers did not merely fight. They hunted. They executed Imperial governors live on their own communication networks, broadcasting messages not of negotiation, but of certainty. Your reign is ending. Civilians whisper of human troops who never slept, never faltered, never stopped. Whether those stories were true or not no longer mattered. Fear itself had become a weapon. The Empire launched counterattacks of terrifying scale. Entire sectors were firebombed from orbit. Civilian populations were enslaved or executed in the hope of deterring human advances. But this only fed humanity's fury. For every atrocity, 10 Imperial worlds burned. The galaxy watched as a myth of Imperial invincibility crumbled, replaced by a new legend, the species that could not be broken. By the 6th month of open war, Imperial fleets no longer advanced into human space. They stayed on the defensive, forming massive walls of ships around core worlds. But static defenses played into humanity's strength. Human forces bypassed blockades entirely, striking targets the Empire considered untouchable. Communications hubs fell silent. Shipyards were destroyed before new vessels could be launched. Even Imperial capital planets, previously thought beyond reach, found human sabotage teams infiltrating orbital stations and disabling planetary shields from within. The final phase of the war began with the fall of Varkath Prime, the Empire's largest fortress world. 30 billion lived beneath its planetary shield, guarded by fleets so vast entire species believed no enemy could ever breach it. Humanity took it in less than a week. Instead of prolonged siege, they infected the planet's defense grid with a cascading logic virus hidden inside a captured Imperial data core. Automated systems turned against their masters, firing on friendly ships and opening shield corridors for human landers. When the fighting ended, the entire garrison was gone. Not captured, not surrendered, simply erased. The collapse was rapid and unstoppable. With its fleets shattered, supply lines ruined, and allies defecting out of fear, the Empire bled out. High Command executed officers daily to enforce obedience. But even fear could not hold a dying regime together. Mutinies erupted everywhere. Some Imperial world voluntarily surrendered to humanity to avoid destruction, broadcasting their capitulation in desperate hope that it would spare them annihilation. Humanity accepted no terms but unconditional submission, and even that did not always save those who had taken part in the executions. The Emperor himself, hiding on a distant core world behind legions of guards and fleets, became the final target. Human forces bypassed planetary defenses entirely by detonating a gravitic warhead in the upper atmosphere, collapsing orbital fortresses in a single strike. Ruthless War Soldiers infiltrated the palace complex and eliminated the Imperial leadership without ceremony. There were no grand speeches, no show trials, no endless negotiation. Humanity had no interest in politics. This was retribution, not conquest. When the Emperor's signal ceased, humanity broadcast a single transmission to the entire galaxy. The message contained no threats, no boasts, no ideology, only a simple declaration. This is the price of hanging our women. The words burned across every star system that could receive a signal. There was no mistaking their meaning. Humanity did not seek an empire. Humanity did not seek control. Humanity sought only to make certain that no one would ever dare to humiliate or harm their kind again. The aftermath was immediate and absolute. The Galactic Empire ceased to exist as a governing force. Worlds once loyal to its banner were abandoned or claimed by local powers too frightened to challenge humanity. Species across the galaxy rewrote their political strategies overnight, treating humans not as a minor nuisance, but as the one force no sane civilization would provoke. Treaties were signed without being requested. Borders were respected without needing to be enforced. Entire navies were repositioned away from human space, not out of diplomacy but out of terror.